Good morning. I'm going to share with you how I did this Y seam. It's very easy, and if you're a quilter, you've probably already figured it out. And if you haven't, when you see how I do this, you're going to see that it's very, very easy and simple, and it'll work out perfect every time. So to begin with, we have to have a template. If you're going to be, the main reason we would probably do a Y seam would be because we're fussy cutting something. So here is the lower right and the lower left. And I'm going to show you real quick here that I fussy cut this using just these two templates, but I made sure that I had a dog in sort of the middle and away from seams, and I made 4 of these, and they're all just a little bit different because of the fussy cutting, so it just makes it so much fun to think about doing things like that. So to make your template to fussy cut something like this, you need both your upper pieces, and I just flip one, because I cut these out on my scan and cut my pattern pieces, and I just flipped them, and I took my ruler and a pencil, and you can see, I think you can see, that there's a line right here and a line right here. And I drew those lines, and the pattern tells us that it is a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so I just came in 3/8 inch, drew my line, came in 3/8 inch, and drew my line. So now, since Leanne is such a wonderful pattern designer, she probably doesn't even realize this, but for somebody like me who wants to hack or jazz up a design, she did everything perfect. She made a little point right here, and that makes it really easy to line up these two top pieces. You can see I'm just going to line that up right there, and then I'll line the line up. This is the line I drew with the other line I drew, and put a piece of tape here. And of course I don't have any tape handy, but let's pretend that I have a piece of tape there. This is going to look like a clip, but we're going to pretend it's a piece of tape. Thank you, Leanne, for letting me share this on the group. So now I have, let me back you out just a little bit. Now I have a full template for the top. But now but how do I see when I have a big piece of fabric out and I'm, when I'm thinking about where do I want to cut, and how do I know this is the top of the bag, so, but I can't see where my 3/8 inch seam allowances are in here, and I don't know where to put it so that I can actually fussy cut something and have it centered. So here's the easy way to do this. I just traced this off on another piece of cardstock. This is just cardstock. So I traced this off on another piece of cardstock. Then I cut it out, and when I cut it out, it was this size. You can see that this is the size of the one-piece top template. Get you where you can see a little better maybe. So then it was just a matter of drawing another 3/8 inch seam allowance on the inside of the edges and cutting out the middle. So now I have a window that I can use, and I can lay this on my fabric and I can cut out anything. So there's the way I did. That's the way I did the top, as far as getting my. And by the way, you know, this is quilt cotton. This is Alexander Henry, and it's oh golly, Los Elegantes. And you know, what if I have a lot of fabric here, and then there's something else maybe that I want to use, I want to have be my focal point. And when you're cutting quilt cotton, you know, you have a straight of grain and a crosswise grain and a bias. So let's say that I've got a scrap over here, and I don't want to waste this beautiful fabric. But I've got a scrap, and the only way that my little window will fit is like this, maybe. See, I got this scrap, and now I'm on the bias. But we don't need to worry about that, really, because this isn't a garment that we're going to wear, so we don't have to worry about bias stretch. And also, we're going to fuse, woven fuse 2 on the back of this, and this is going to be on grain. Woven fuse is woven just like the cotton fabric, so it has a crosswise, a straight, and a bias. So we'll put this on the straight grain, and we'll fuse this to the back. And that's what I have done right here. Here we go. So this pretty part of my fabric has been cut out and fused with woven fuse 2 on the back. And I have another piece of fabric that was a scrap, and you can see this is the crosswise. This is a crosswise grain, so this is going to be the straight grain. And I want this dancer and these skulls. And you gotta make sure you're doing things right side up. So here's the top of my bag, and if you think you're gonna get confused, just write top or something up here, or zipper or something. So this is going to be on the bias. So I'll just back it with the piece of woven fuse that's cut on the straight, and we'll be just fine. And then I don't have to waste. See, I wouldn't be able to get it. My template won't even fit on here anywhere unless I turn it. And this looks just really cool. And when I cut these out, I just hold this with my fingers really carefully, but you could put some tape on the inside here if you're not very confident that you can scoot around this. And I just hold it with my fingers, and I use my rotary cutter. But you could also mark it around the outside. And it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. You could even rough cut it, as long as you're outside your, as long as you're outside your seam allowances. Because when you press your woven fuse on, things might shift a little bit. So when you get done, putting your woven fuse on, pressing that on there and fusing it, it might be that you'll have to trim it again anyway. So there's the back. This is the back. And this is the shiny side of my woven fuse, so that means it's the glue side. And boy, you don't want to get this stuff on your ironing surface or your iron or your heat press. Always use your Teflon protective sheets. Okay, so then I would just take this to the iron and press that on, and I've got a one-piece top. So let's move on, and I'll show you how to put the two bottom pieces on. It's very simple. Okay, so here we are. I've got my woven fused on, and you can see that my woven fuse came out just a little beyond my fabric, so I'm going to trim that so that it's a nice clean edge so that I can see what I'm doing. I think I'll trim this top edge too. It's got just a tiny little sliver on it, but it's distracting to me, so I'll just take it off of there. Alright, so there's my top. And here are the two pieces for the lower part. And by the way, this is the large size. I made both sizes, the regular and the large. I think this one's 120. I guess I'll have to ask Leanne, but I think it's 125%. But I've had more fun with this large size, and it does sell better for me. I don't know why, but it does. I put a shoulder strap on mine, and I have a little fun treatment that I put on the back. I do not own an industrial machine, and so this is the way that I've done my D-ring connectors. I don't want to put them in here. My machine would do it. I have a Bernina 770, and my machine would definitely do this, but it makes this too bulky right here, and I really love the look of the double. I love double top stitching, and I like extra design elements on my bags, and so that's what I did. Sometimes you have to be an engineer or a sub-designer so that you can develop hacks that you can use if you have a domestic machine to get around those tough places that an industrial machine would not even blink at. So anyway, so faux leather, some faux leather can stand some heat, and a lot of it cannot, and vinyl is the same, and cork. So this has kind of a fuzzy back on it, and I got this from fabric.com. It's called Red Gator faux leather. So you can find it. If you need the number, just shout and I'll give it to you. But this doesn't like to get hot, so you can't really interface this with anything. So what I'm going to do is when I get this all together, I'll put foam. I'll just top stitch. I usually just top stitch around. This is the back, and I made myself a one-piece back for the outer exterior of the bag. Anyway, I just 1/8 of an inch all the way around is all I do. Sometimes, like on the marine vinyl, I'll put down 2 or 3 or 4 maybe rows of double-sided tape, permanent double-sided tape, and stick it, and that'll be in there forever in the bag. And then I also top stitch it. But for my machine, I don't worry about this foam being in the seam allowance. You know, some people say to trim it out of the seam allowance, but I don't worry about it except for where the zipper's going to go, and then I do. And the only reason I do it there is because it's a little puffy on the lining, and if you don't top stitch the lining along with the exterior when you do your top stitching after you install your zipper, the zipper can catch in the lining, and so we don't want that. But so after I get this all done, I'll put a big piece of foam on the back of this, and so that'll be enough interfacing and stability for this vinyl. Some vinyl's a lot thicker and thinner, so you are all bag makers, so you know that. So now what we have to do next, let's get back to this here. So we need to know where our 3/8 inch seam allowance is. It's just like before. You have to know where your seam allowance is. So I'm going to mark it on here, and I'm just going to use a pen. You could use a friction marker or something if you want to, but nobody will ever see it. And then you've got to have your 3/8 inch along this slanted edge, because this is how we're going to get our perfect Y seam. Same thing over here, 3/8 inch seam allowance, and same here, 3/8 inch. Get up here where you can see me. I've got a different camera for filming. I've been doing videos for a long time, and I thought this camera would be a big blessing, but it's kind of giving me fits. Okay, so here we are. So now we might have to do a little trimming, because this has to fit just perfectly. And I cut this with my rotary cutter, and look, it's just, I don't have to trim anything. It's all going to fit. And this stuff is the most slippery stuff. So you want to be sure and clip this, and you can't pin it, so make sure it's not going to wiggle on you when you get to your machine and start, put your presser foot down and start sewing. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this to my machine, and I'm going to sew this seam right exactly on that line that I drew. That's my 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to press this open, and I'm going to do my top stitching on both sides, but I'm going to start my stitching right here. See where my lines kind of intersect right here? There's a spot. That's where I'm going to start stitching. My needle is going to drop down right in that spot, and I'm going to go ahead a couple stitches and back stitch right here, and then stitch on off. I'll just stitch clear off the end down here and back stitch down here too. And then when I top stitch this, I'm going to top stitch all the way from top to bottom on both sides of the seam. So I'll go do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, all stitched. So you see I'm open at the top, the distance of the seam allowance, but I've top stitched from top to bottom on both sides. So isn't that pretty? Boy, that came together kind of neat there in the middle. Sometimes things happen and you don't plan them. It really turns out cool. Anyhow, okay, so here we go. So we're going to use some 3/16 inch double-sided tape. Maybe you have wider and you can make it work. So here's the thing. We are going to top stitch. We're going to fold this over, and we're going to top stitch eventually. We've got some work to do here and here, but in the end we are going to top stitch these two seams. So you can buy non-stick needles now. I don't know how they work. I haven't tried one yet, but if they do work, boy, that'd be cool. But we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and this is my rollover point for my seam allowance. This is 3/8 inch, and I'm going to roll it over, and then I'm going to top stitch 1/8 inch. So I want to keep my tape to where it'll catch this, but I won't sew through it. And it's okay if you do sew through it. You could just take an alcohol wipe and you can clean your needle off. And I used a 2.85 stitch length to sew this seam and a 3.0 to do my top stitching. And I used a Teflon needle because it's on vinyl or faux leather. And when I did my top stitching, I had faux leather on top and bottom, so I put a piece of tissue paper on the bed of my machine, just dollar store tissue paper, and sailed right along. My Teflon foot above and tissue paper below, and it worked perfectly. Okay, so now we are going to fold this back and stick it down. And the main reason you're using this tape is because you can't pin anything. And just think how horribly fiddly clips would be. So this tape is pretty cool stuff. So we're gonna just, I'm looking at my line here, and I'm folding right on the line. And I'm kind of using my eye to make sure everything is, I want to see a nice straight line. I don't want to see any wobbles or bumps or anything. So then we'll do the other side now. And I've just gone to the center there. See, let's start in the middle. It makes it a little bit easier to get things stuck down here. And right here I'm going to pay close attention that I'm exactly perfect at the Y, right here at the intersection. And I'm telling you, double stick tape. And I get this tape from Tandy Leather. Amy Butler put me onto this stuff, and I'm not kidding. This stuff has changed my life in bag making and in other things too. And so now, let's see. So, and 3/16 inch double stick tape. I use it the most of all measurements. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, it's looking pretty good, huh? Now you can kind of see how this is going to come together. But guess what? We have to be able to see where our 3/8 inch is, don't we? So this is looking pretty good, and look how perfect. So let's turn it over to the wrong side, and let's turn this over to the wrong side. And there's our 3/8 inch seam allowance, so all we have to do is line our solid panel top up with this seam allowance. So now remember, we're going to do a 1/8 inch top stitch along here. So, and we can't pin vinyl. And look, how in the world would we ever, you can't get a clip in there if you wanted to. So we're going to do this, and we're going to stay away from our 1/8 inch area where we're going to top stitch, and put our double-sided tape right on there. And don't worry if your tape, maybe it won't cover everything. That's all right. Or maybe it'll go outside the lines too, It might. See, a little bit of my tape here is going to go outside the line. That's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Just don't stress the small stuff, huh? Bag making is supposed to be a really enjoyable, fun thing. So, let's just have fun with it. So there's that side. Now we're going to take the tape off the other side. I usually just do one side at a time. And now you don't have any math. If you're a quilter and you like doing the math, go ahead. But there it is. So now all I have to do is take this to the machine and top stitch at my 1/8 inch. I'll come here and pivot and back up. And this seems a little heavy right here, but it's really not. And when you get your stitches in here, and be sure and use a 3.5 And I used, actually, I used a polyester embroidery thread when I top stitched mine because I wanted to have a little shine, because the faux leather has got a little bit of a shine to it, and I wanted to have a little shine. And I used, you saw in my picture yesterday where I was kind of auditioning different threads to use with this, and I ended up finding a burgundy that I really like that goes with this faux leather real good. So let me go top stitch this. I'll be right back. There we go. It's all top stitched on. There's my seam, attaching my one-piece top, and it looks just great. So on a on a fabric like this, or even if you had like a big rose here, or maybe you've got a special dog, cat, I don't know. There might be something. Might be a Christmas fabric and you've got some special star or something that you want to have the focal point be for the top of your bag. I think it's great to do a little stitching around here. On the one I made yesterday, let me see if I can find it. I did do, here's the back, so you can see kind of the shape I did. I just picked a decorative stitch around my off my machine and just stitched in a little curve around my focal point on here. It's hard to see, but in person it almost looks like trapunto because the foam makes it sort of puff out here, go down and puff out here, so it looks kind of cool. Anyway, fun things that you can do. So that's the easy way to do a Y seam. Remember, when you cut this out, if you cut this on the grain, the straight of grain like we talked about earlier in the video, this edge and this edge are going to be bias, and they're going to really stretch. And if you try some which way to stitch this in and then switch it and stitch this in, it's never going to come out accurate. It just isn't ever going to come out accurate. Little pieces in a quilt block, yes. Huge pieces of faux leather and woven fused 2 backed cotton, probably not ever going to work. So this is the easiest way to do it. It's exactly accurate. This is 3/8 inch. 1, 2, 3, there it is. 3/8 inch, exactly. And so your pattern is, all your pattern pieces are going to fit. Here's the back. So I had to order some, I needed some black with gunmetal. I'm going to use gunmetal. This is my tassel cap and zipper pull and some other things. And so I'm going to use gunmetal hardware with this, because there's so much gray in here. I loved it. Plus there's black in the faux leather. And I didn't have any zippers that were the right color zipper tape that had gunmetal teeth, so I had to order some of those. So I'm kind of dead in the water now till my zipper order gets here. And then I needed a couple of swivel clasps, so I ordered those too. That's the way it is with bag making. It's you never seem to have I never seem to have everything on hand that I need. But once it gets here, then I can make a whole bunch of these, because I have almost a yard of that fabric and this fabric. And I love Alexander Henry, so. Alright, so you guys, if you have any questions, somebody asked where I got my labels. They're leather, and I get them from an Etsy shop called Leathergoodshop, Leathergoodshop, I think. It's all one word. All one word. And I get almost all my hardware from Emmeline bags. I get all my zippers from my Handmade Space, just about. And you can make on my YouTube channel, I've got a little quickie video on how to make tassels. So when this bag is done, I'll use this fabric and this vinyl, or I'm sorry, faux leather, and I'll make a vinyl or a tassel that will fit in this tassel cap, and this will have a really pretty tassel hanging off of it. They all will. I put a tassel on all mine. So anyhow, that's it. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Enjoy making your bags. If you have any questions, just holler. And thank you, Leanne. Bye.